We're back. This is SOA Consulting Services, Steve Bonaconci speaking. Today, we're going to talk about the second part of the tutorial, which was involved when discussing the registration form of an Angular application. And today, we're going to discuss the web service that receives the contact us JSON data associated with submitting that form. So, just to review, we have an Angular application. Um, um, which uses an Angular router, and we have different Angular actions which invoke controllers and show different template views. Those controllers get invoked, state gets created, the template gets compiled, the dynamic data from the scope of the controller gets bound to the template, and in this particular scenario, we're filling out a form, we're submitting the form, and we're going to be discussing the NodeJS application that provides the service to do a registration. That registration will persist into Mongo. Okay, so first let's discuss the architecture of the application. Like I said, I have WebStorm, I have an Angular application, I have different site areas, I have modules representing each site area, and I have an application, which is a Node.js application. My package.json file has certain dependencies. I use the body parser, I use MongoDB, I use nconfig for properties, a crypto library to encrypt the password before storing it into Mongo. Of course, I use Express, and Mongoose is something I'm using, but I don't think this service uses it. Okay, so let's take a look at the application. Okay, so I have Angular. I use an HTTP service to hit on a URL which was pointed to my Node.js service, and it also points to the register user service that does do a post. So Angular, in order to implement that in Angular, I have an app here. Let me go up. I have an app which uses a post and defines the registration service. And so this is the web service which is defined to service my register user. So let me first give you a little bit of background. I did already pointed out that I'm requiring certain services. I'm using Express, the cookie parser, the crypto library, nconfig, mongoose. Well, here's what I'm really using, the Mongo client to store my data. Okay, so first thing I do is in my Node.js application is I use this nconfig. It looks for command line arguments, environmental variables. It doesn't find it, so it goes and loads my config.json file. My config.json file has all my parameters that I need to perform my register user. I need a MongoDB URL. In particular, I need the MongoDB URL. So first, configuration. Then I define an Express application. I address the CORS issue by setting the response headers appropriately. I use a cookie parser, I use session, I use the body parser, blah blah blah. Okay, now let's get to the service. Here's my register user service. First thing I do is I take the request coming into the function and I get the body object. This is my user JSON object that I submitted with my form. When I submitted the form, I bound the the user object or the contactors object name value pairs to the object, so I could log out the username, the password, etc. First thing I do after I do that, the first major thing I do is I generate a salt value. I use the date, a random number generator, to generate a random salt value. That value, along with the crypto library, is used to create a hashed password. I use the crypto library to create a hash using the SHA-1 hash and a digest of hex. This gives me that hash password that I'm going to store into the database. Now, I also have to store the salt value because I've got to unsalt this value after I retrieve it and I check for authentication. So getting back to the facts, here I'm connecting my Mongo client using my MongoDB URL. Once I do that successfully, I take my DB object and I take my user object and I save it into my user profile collection within that database. So what did I do? I connected to the database. I'm using a particular database within MongoDB. It's an SOACS database. I'm saving the user object into the user profile collection within that database. And then when I respond with true. I mean, this really shouldn't be a string. It should probably be a Boolean value. But the bottom line is, if the response is null or empty, then I'm going to ask you to tell you that the registration failed. Else, I've had a successful registration. So the response is kind of critical as well. Let me give you a little bit. Let me just show you a little bit of what I'm talking about here. In the Angular client code, I call the HTTP service with the register user service. If it's successful, I put user registered equal to the data that's coming back. Since that's non-null, I say you saved your registration data successfully. Now, let's test this. Let's first go to let me just show you. Let me just show DB here. Okay, I don't know what program I'm in, so I'm going to kill this. Okay, let's do this. Let's first test our registration. What password should I use? Man2. Let me call this 99. I'm going to show this password so I know what the password is. And now I'm going to just use some old values that I previously used. Makes life a little easier. And let me save. Okay, I have an error, so let's go take a look to see what happened. First, okay, let me just go back and see what happened here. And I know exactly what happened. I don't have my web service running. Okay, so let's do this. Let's do a sudo node SOACS server app.js. Let's start it. Oh, there it is. It started. So my Node.js application is started. Mongo is always started. I could use forever to keep my Node.js app running, but I've been debugging and coding all day, so I'm just going to test this out now. Let's go back here. I'm successfully saved. Let's go back to see what I printed out. Oh, I'm in register user post. I have my username, my password. Notice my password is encrypted. It's salted and encrypted. I have my salt value. I'm storing that as well.